Yeah, we're live now.
Oh, my bad.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining the Rocha Revolution. It's an exciting day today because we're at the 1 year anniversary. It was a year ago that we started this adventure with the Rocha Revolution to kind of create some space for folks to have some conversations on here that were outside of the norm. I invited my good friend Albert Morales to come back because Albert was our first guest on the Rocha Revolution just over a year ago. Albert Morales, thanks for joining us again on the Rocha Revolution.
Thanks for having me.
What's going on at the farm today?
I spent most of the day trying to wreck some posts and taking some down that I need to space out correctly after those posts that you helped me with over the weekend. So,
For those of you who don't know, I was out at the farm this weekend and I showed up just to pick up some free eggs, and Albert put me to work for 6 hours. They're the most expensive eggs I've ever owned.
hey, it was worth it. It was worth it. The camaraderie, Chuck, the camaraderie.
I don't know about all of that. I could call you on the phone and have camaraderie. But thanks, Albert, for joining us. As y'all know, Albert is a longtime political operative from the great state of Texas, from the great town of Fort Worth. I don't call it a city. Dallas is a city. Fort Worth is a town. And I'm happy to have him on board today. He's also the author of a brand new book that dropped this week, because I think I got mine in the mail last week. Should put the book up. There you go. Why don't you tell folks what this book is, now that you're a big distinguished author, and why you wrote it?
Sure. So, it's titled 40-Year Prayer. My wife and I have one daughter. And I grew up in the Southern Baptist tradition back home in Fort Worth. We now live here in Maryland on farm country. About an hour out of D.C. And my wife was brought up in Alabama, Episcopalian. So kind of a clash of you can't go and holler amen at a Episcopalian service. But I was worried that we hadn't raised Martha in the tradition of going to church. And, I make light of, the health struggles I've had over the years since birth. I've had a heart defect, and I'm on pacemaker number 3. And I'm not getting any younger, and I worried about leaving one day and not having left some kind of blueprint for her, because nothing that happens to us that is good happens by chance if you're a Christian. And I wanted her to know that. So I went out and wrote a much thicker version, but I found that at the end of the day, it was a little bit too, not sure the word sad is appropriate, but I wanted to shed some light on some of the downturns I've had in life. DC does not reward, people talking about, their losses. So that was a consideration in this book. It's a big town. It's a town that hypes up. It's full of bravado, and so that didn't really bother me as much as I wanted her to know that I've been blessed and we've been blessed. But the reason behind that, and I walk her through my childhood, and I had some intellectual struggles in the Texas public school system that I just didn't know how to deal with. My parents being immigrants, I was able to hide it from them pretty well. My sister was she graduated high school salutatory, and I think it's second in rank, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I never made it that far, but I found a loophole to go to college anyway, because in Texas, at least at the time, all you had to do was be 18. And because I couldn't master math, not even the fundamentals of math, I needed a way out. Anyway, I go into that, and a lot of this, pretty much everything that's in this book, was news to my parents and my family and close friends. So I had to do some phone calls before the publisher clicked the button to send out to the world, and fess up on some things, and that was difficult. But luckily for me, they were all very understanding and proud for me to come out and put it on paper. So I'm not saying that I'm ready to now, ride off into the sunset, but I do rest easier knowing that my daughter now has, she's a teenager. She's going into 11th grade next year or this fall, and I can rest a lot easier. But the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or my publisher, Westbow Press. It's a Christian publishing company. So the editing process was fun. He couldn't use curse words. He couldn't, you know, I'm sure they kept me from getting sued by any number of folks. But it was fun to write. I spent most of a good part of the first part of the year just getting it edited and you know removing some things that I thought maybe are best left for another day when my daughter's older. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. It's not going to be one of these New York Times bestsellers. It's an audience of one, but my friends and family have been very, very welcoming of it, and I get notes every day from people. A lot of them are kind of lamenting. Oh man, you sorry you had to go through all that, but I never felt that I was alone. Chuck, you were brought up a Baptist as well in East Texas, so you understand. I did rebel from God because there's one piece in the book that talks about my love for baseball. I wanted to play baseball. I was convinced that I was going to be in the major leagues as a kid, and I made the team as a freshman in high school, and I think they even bumped me up to junior varsity like within the first couple of weeks. But then my first report card came in, and Governor Mark White, Democrat, he had recruited Ross Perot, the late Ross Perot, to take on the challenge of fixing the public school system. And he came up with this brilliant idea of no pass, no play. So if he failed the class, he couldn't play any extracurricular sports, do band, choir, none of that. And right before the first game, coach called me in and said, "Hey, I need you to give me your uniform and your mitt and leave the locker room." I say, "Why is that?" "Well, you failed math." And that was a long walk home. That was the longest walk to home that I can ever remember. Probably the saddest day in my life. And I didn't, I stopped watching baseball. I gave it up. And, years later, it turned out that I was forced back into at least watching the game. And you and I have since been to some baseball games, Chuck, when Martha was little. You took us to a number of games. That's probably one of the handful of games that I've gone to since then. But all is well. So if you're wondering about the title, 40-Year Prayer is, a few years ago, I realized that my daughter was the answer to my prayer. And it came some 40 years later when I realized that, unlike me, she's going to sail through high school and college, and she's got a 4.0, and I think that's God compensating me for, the brains that He shorted me on, and I'll take it. I've never been able to really help her with her homework because she takes these AP classes. She was doing advanced classes in elementary level. You know, nothing has really changed since. But aren't we going to talk politics, Chuck?
We are. I was letting you get through selling books.
I appreciate you letting me pitch my book. Again, if you order it, I think yesterday was a deadline to order in order to get it before Father's Day. But you could try, even if you give it to them late. A gift is a gift.
Yes, and Ebony took my copy, so I haven't read it all yet. She's reading it, and I told her she should.
You don't read.
I may read it for the audio version, but Ebony's reading it. My wife's been rereading the Bible. We've been living through that and all those good things. Anyway, enough about Bibles and all the good things. We're proud of you for writing that. And Martha, I know Martha's proud to have your daddy who's an author. And it's hard to believe that Martha is in the 11th grade. When you said that, it sends shivers up my back. But anyway, let's talk politics. Folks are on here to hear us talk about all the things that's been going on in politics. Me and Albert both grew up around the same time in East Texas when there was Democrats, as he mentioned, Mark White and Ann Richards in Texas. And there's a lot changing in our party. There's a lot changing around Texas. We've seen the Latinos in our communities become a true swing voting universe. They are now moving back and forth between the parties pretty freely. There's still a base of Democratic Latinos and a base of Republican Latinos, but we are still probably the group of voters that are shifting back and forth more so than any others. And I want to start our political conversation with what's going on with the Senate map right now and talk about what we're seeing in Texas, Albert. You're one of the few experts on Texas politics because you've done it for so long. You've seen folks give the false impression that Democrats are going to win with Colin Allred, or Democrats are going to win with Beto O'Rourke, or Democrats are going to win with this little Mexican who's driving a white truck around Texas named Morales. And it wasn't you and it wasn't your uncle. Was it Dan Morales?
No, that was Victor.
Victor Morales, right. Victor Morales. Oh, you showed me this great picture at your house the other day. It was got so many memories. But give me why you think what we're seeing in Texas is happening. You see that Latinos realigning. You see this young white man who's a state rep who's talking about scripture and Bible and family and faith and a rigged system. Do you think that's the reason he's catching such fire in Texas?
I think it's a combination of things, but his genuineness is certainly part of it. Um, and I can only relay what I'm hearing from friends and family back home who will tell me that they are for the first time, really taking a look underneath the hood. And Chuck, I think what's different from Beto's meteoric rise when he ran statewide but came up short is that he didn't have a prominent, uh, statewide name running, at the top of the ticket. We have Gina right now, who is running for governor, and I think the the key to success here is investing enough resources, not only in Gina, but also Bobby Polito, right? Because it's a coordinated campaign effort that has to happen in South Texas because that's where Beto lost. He didn't, he just didn't get enough votes down in the valley and parts of South Texas and obviously the rural parts. I think James is able to go, Tallarico is able to go to parts of rural Texas that maybe Beto probably should have. And I'm not sure what it still would have been enough. He was still viewed as too progressive. When you're able to speak the language of Texas people, you have to remember it's the heart of the Bible Belt. It's also the heart of the Latino Bible Belt. We talked earlier about how I grew up in the Southern Baptist tradition, and you did too. And people assume that everyone down there is, either Catholic or agnostic, and faith plays a big role. And when you're able to quote scripture and talk about the gospels and how Jesus spoke more about defending the least of these and do it in an articulate way, then that's a game changer, and especially if you're genuine about it. And I'm not gonna I'm not gonna downgrade his opponent. I'm not gonna talk bad about sorry about his Tallarico's opponent. We all know about his shortcomings, but um, you know, again, I think uh, if we could afford to run a strong get out the vote operation and start now. If you remember when Ann Richards lost, Chuck, he lost because there was an 11th hour decision. A lot of people forget about this to pull the money out of get out the vote effort in San Antonio, Bexar County, Harris, Houston, Dallas. There was no street money. There was no way to get the vote out. And right now, given the amount of resources that Tallarico has, if he can really put those to work and having a really strong canvassing operation in some of these key battleground counties, Tarrant County, Dallas County, Harris, Bear, obviously the Valley. Um, I just I feel really good about his chances, more so than I have. I haven't been this excited. I think I told somebody since Paul Hobby was on the ballot. He was the last Democrat that came close, remember? He was like 20,000 votes shy, and he was running for comptroller. So it wasn't like he was at the top of the ticket. People looked for Paul. They had to look for Paul Hobby's name and vote for him because he had that business acumen about him that the business community liked. They remembered his dad, former governor, Paul Hobby Airport there in Houston. So I'm excited. And then you've got some really key congressional races that are at play down there. Obviously, you've got the AK guy, 23, running against what's her name?
Katie Padilla,
Katie Padilla, uh, former school teacher, I think. If we
social
win that,
worker.
yeah, if we win that one, that means it's a tsunami. I think shifting gears a little bit here, we're going to know if it's going to be a big night just by looking at Pennsylvania. It'll come in early. You got those three races. I think it's the first, the seventh, and the eighth. The eighth congressional district is one that I'll be watching that night. It's what's the name of that incumbent that took out Matt Cartwright? Uh, Breast Man or something. It starts with the B. Anyway, he's a
Right.
freshman, I think. Um, and I think if we win that seat, I think Trump carried that by 8 points. If we win that House seat, um, with the mayor, who's the Democratic nominee, I think it's going to be a big night for us.
Yeah, another one to watch there is Pennsylvania 7. We lost that seat where there's lots of Latinos, mainly Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, where Susie Wild was the congresswoman. There's a new freshman MAGA rep in there that got swept
McKenzie.
in. Yeah, McKenzie got swept in there as well. So I think those and the Virginia elections that we'll also know early will tell us a lot about that. The other race in Texas that you didn't mention that we'll know if something special is happening is the new 35th district in North San Antonio, where the sheriff is running, who won the runoff there. If he's in the play, because all of these seats with Texas 35 and Texas 23 are R plus 10, R plus 12 districts, but that's under the Trump presidential
Yeah.
number. That's a much
Yeah.
different number, as me and you know, in an off year, right?
Yep. And, we talked about Bobby and the statewide effect that he's going to bring to South Texas. That guy you talk about genuine. He's likable, right? He's got that likability about him. People really, they love him. They don't like him. They love the guy. And I think for a lot of voters who have been staying home for during midterms, especially in South Texas, they're just going to assume that they're going to go vote for Bobby. And those who don't live in his district, and then he got the King of Laredo, Henry. He's going to do his own due diligence and crank up the vote there as well. So I feel really good about Texas, more so than I have in a in, in a long while.
What do you think is, a lot of this is attributed to the dissatisfaction around Donald Trump and Republicans controlling every aspect of the government at the federal level. Even I would say the Supreme Court. You don't have to say that, I'll say that. And with them having total control and folks' lives not getting better, getting into foreign intervention wars where it's driving up gas prices, I think all of this combined is building an economic anxiety that's piling on to an inflation that was already there, that's piling on in the Latino community of ICE raids and folks being demagogued just because they're brown people trying to make a living. I think all of these things, not one singular thing, but I think all of those things are building to what we're seeing in this blue wave that's coming, because base Democrats are inspired. Independents who gave Donald Trump a chance see that they got shit on, again, in my opinion, and things haven't gotten better. And then you have Republicans who aren't motivated to vote because they see him in the Epstein files. They see him in these intervention wars, and these are all things he ran against. So it's the perfect storm happening for it not to be a D plus 2 or 3 year, but possible. I'm not going to get in front of my skis of a D plus 7, 8, 9. In all the special elections and off year elections that we've had at this point, it's been a D plus 15. Now, we know that that is not the same turnout as a regular off year election. But if we got half of that, it would be a D plus 7 or 8, which would then sweep in all of these seats in Texas and many others. Do you agree or have something to add?
I agree with all that, Chuck. I think really any R+5 seat right now, just to dumb it down a little bit more, or a little bit, uh, is it's pretty much gone right now. And I was looking at the generic ballot. I went back, I think, to February, and it's been consistent. From anywhere from 5 to 10, 5 to 10. It swings back. I think it's somewhere in the middle, uh, myself, but if these gas prices are still such around election day, who knows? Who knows what could happen? Because it is, if we talked earlier about how I live over here in farm country. This is the first time I was driving out to pick up a piece of equipment for my tractor last week, and some of my neighbors who I know plant soybean or corn this year, uh, I saw a number of bare cropland, just acres and acres. As far as the eye could see, they didn't plant. So I talked to one of my buddies that lives nearby, and I'm like, "What's going on with Harrison over there? They usually plant corn this year." Yeah, well, you seen the diesel prices? $1,000 to fill up your diesel tank on one of those big tractors right now. Not to mention the fertilizer. You know, and up here in Maryland, for folks who don't live in the Northeast, it's not like we have irrigation systems, right? We rely on rain, and you augment that with some fertilizer and you get your crop. Sometimes you don't even need much fertilizer, but you do need diesel. And that was compounded by a freeze that we had in April. So my cherry trees, no cherries this year. Pear tree, no pears. Nothing. I was looking over the weekend. I was trying to see, because this is around the time that you get sour cherries for pies and whatnot. But it's this compilation of things, Chuck, that's just it's creating the perfect storm, to your point. And I I really don't know, where we're going. I wish I had a magic wand and could tell you what's going to happen. But as we get closer, I don't know that these Iranians are going to allow any deal that doesn't have a toll of some sort. And once you have that becomes permanent. That's an added cost to anyone who consumes, fuel. And I'd rather be us than them.
There's something else that's different that is against the Democrats before we give too much hopium to everybody out there about what's fixing to happen. There is a difference in what we're seeing between this off cycle compared to 2018, which is the last comparable election you should be looking at, because it was the first election after Donald Trump got elected the first time when we had huge successes. Well, what Republicans have now that they didn't have then are these massive spending advantages. They've raised more money. In the 2018 election, we had those advantages, and we raised more money with the DCCC, with our supporting super PACs. And not only are Republicans outraising us at both of those levels, Donald Trump single-handedly has a $300 million super PAC that he controls that has unlimited money of up to $300 million. They can get much more. We all know they can write unlimited checks. The question will become, for all of you political nerds out there, is how far does money go in elections, and when is enough? In Texas, it can go a long way. Like in Texas, you spend $1 million, it ain't nothing. But in a place like North Carolina, where there's a Senate race, in Maine, where there's a Senate race, in New Hampshire, where there's a Senate race, you can only buy so much TV. Do you think, Albert, that this huge money advantage that they have gives them a better advantage than they had in 2018?
Well, first off, I think my guess is that these massive amounts of money that they're raising, they are coming from billionaires, right? Big donors.
Yes.
I think what was different in 2018 and previous election cycles is he had this strong MAGA base, people who were sending in $5. Millions of people sending $5 every week, every month, whatever it was. I don't think that's the case anymore. So I would rather go up against slightly more money with a less invigorated base, because our base is motivated right now. You see it in the turnout, these primary elections, these special elections, these runoff elections. We're outpacing Republicans. So that's a good sign. But you're right. I think the amount of money, I I don't want to get in trouble with or crossed with some of my consultant friends, but including yourself.
Yeah, let's start right here.
We're not. I don't watch these campaign ads anymore. If I see something come across my phone, I shut it off, or if I'm streaming, I do the same thing. And I don't think I'm in the minority. That's why I think it's critical that we, start redirecting some of those funds to the streets. the way we used to do it, how we used to build community. When you and I first got started, remember, we'd have retirees and volunteers, and we'd hire high school kids to go door to door in some of these districts, and we'd do it all through the summer, spring, summer, all the way through election day, and it worked. It worked. It remains, the fundamentals of this business never change. Face to face contact is where it's at, and yeah, you're not going to get everyone to open the door, but you're going to get some people, and some people want to talk right now. People want to engage. They want to know what they can do to change what's happening. And the problem is our party has become one that's been dominated too much by consultants. You remember the DNC chairs? So it was just a massive room full of every kind of consultant you could think of, and it's not necessarily. I miss the old machine days, if you will, where we had everyone from labor, from school teachers, neighbors, you know, gathering you know to cause change in the right direction. So I hope that answers your question. But
I want to end some of this conversation by staying in the party and talking about something that stood out with me from our conversation to begin with is that, you know, I am the Mexican on TV with a cowboy hat because I've wore a cowboy hat my whole life since I was a little boy because I grew up on a working farm with my granddaddy. And this weekend we were out at your farm, we're building fence, we're, messing around with the animals, we're messing with your old bull there. And like it just made me think about how me and you are yellow dog Democrats. We've always been Democrats. We've always voted for Democrats. We've helped elect Democratic officials. But it seems like, Albert, that me and you are a dying breed within the party. You just described a consultant culture. You just described, different things going on in our party, and a lot of that is healthy. We should have a robust debate within parties about the vision for the future of the party. But as we talk about the party and the Democrats, losing working class men, losing rural voters, losing country voters, losing voters without a college education like me, losing folks who, that me and you grew up with, who now we both hear from our friends who are staunch MAGAs. How do you think we get the party back? And or do we need to get the party back, being more representative of just two old hardworking Mexicans like me and you've been most of our lives who have been lucky to fail up in many instances. Both of us have become great successes at levels if you compare us to the rest of our families. But where do we go from here?
I'm glad you asked that, Chuck. And the name Ruben Gallego comes to mind. He makes no apologies for the positions that he takes. He was one of the very first leaders within our cohort to, you know, just disavow the use of Latinx in his office. And I'll give you a good example of something that happened to me recently. I was trying to register for this conference that was in DC recently, and you couldn't register without giving your pronouns. I had no problem, you know, doing that. But the average person from back home, the average family member that I grew up with and friends, you give them something, you give them a form to go join a democratic function or to attend a function like that. But one of the stipulations is that you have to fill out your pronouns. You're not going to get them to go. I'm sorry. Do I believe we have a problem with transphobia or whatever the term is today? I don't know. That's just who we are. That's the average uh, profile of the people that you and I grew up with. And you hear you hear people say all the time in focus groups, "Well, I feel like they're shoving it down my throat." I was retelling the story the other day. We were doing focus groups in I think it was a 2018 cycle for Matt and Gary, and they sent me hopscotching across Texas. I think it was in Houston. We did one, and at the end of the focus group, you go in there and you collect all the sheets where they're writing all their answers to some of these questions. And I walked in, and there was just one gentleman still there holding court with a couple of other participants. Working man, you could tell he'd gone there straight from work. He has a mechanic outfit, and he saw me. He sized me down. He knew right away that I was probably with the people who were conducting the focus group. And he says, "Man, I want to be with you, brother, but do y'all really have to light up the White House like a bag of Skittles?" And then the other person's like, "Yeah, yeah, it's those things that really uh, put us off." And I looked at his profile, and he was, someone that was so a working person, and I I don't make it a habit of, you know, um, it's I wasn't the moderator, but I wanted to dig a little deeper. I said, "Is that as important to you as the price of groceries, or, the living that you're making?" He says, "Well," and I've used this example before. He says, "Where I come from, I don't care about political repercussions as much as biblical repercussions." And it goes back to Texas, part of the Bible Belt, and that I had nothing to give, and we until we are able to uh, speak with authority on some of these issues, like Ruben, for example, we're going to keep, spinning our wheels. And these are hard conversations to have. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not anti, uh, pronouns or whatever, but a lot of people are. A lot of people are, and you started this segment by saying that, you're seeing us shift. We've always been a swing voter. That's why the Democratic Party really has never really embraced my my viewpoints. I've always told them we're not base voters. We never will be. I'm old enough to remember 2014. It was a bloodbath that year, but Brian Sandoval got over 50% of the Latino vote. I think closer to 60. Susanna Martinez, same thing. Corey Gardner, Colorado, he got over 50% of the Hispanic vote. Why? Because he was talking our language. They were talking our language. Didn't hurt that they were, Hispanic, which brings us to it. We haven't talked about the presidential, but, you know, if I were a betting man, you have to believe that Rubio is either going to be the nominee or he's going to be on the ticket, regardless, right? That gets him 40% by default of the Hispanic vote. A lot of people are going to say, but look what he's doing with Iran. He's a Secretary of State. He's going to be able to say, hey, when you're asked to serve in that role, you just do it. I was implementing policy that perhaps I didn't believe in, but I had to do it as a Secretary of State. But this is what I believe, and he is probably the most articulate candidate out of the whole lot of Republicans that we're talking about for 2028. But I don't want to get ahead of my skis unless you want to talk about presidential.
Well, there's somebody, Bobby Polito, gave me a great quote one time, and I stole it and I used it as my own. Bobby said, "There ain't nobody in the valley that's poor, but there's a lot of us that are broke."
Yeah.
And I think that's important for Democrats to know. There was another great quote that I probably got from somebody, but I used it this morning on a podcast with Sean Spicer when I said, look, because he was going at me and I was going at him. I'm like, look, Republicans fight to win. Democrats fight to be right. Like and I said, I'm going to use that more. And then the last thing I'll say to your point is that we've forgotten that folks need to like you. We think that they're going to like you because you're right on the policy that's going to make their lives better. And we always are, because we are right to help the poor, the working class. Like, we have the right policy to save Mother Earth, all of those righteous things. We're always going to be right because we think about it, we've studied it, we've focus grouped it, we know. But the American people still have to like you.
Yeah.
They have to like you and they have to trust you. There's been a lot of trust lost within our party that we have to win back. And if I do something wrong, and oh my God, I do stuff wrong all the time. And let me give you boys and girls some little hit from a very flawed man who, as the Bible said, has come up short of the glory of God all the time. You know what I do? I pull up my big boy britches and I walk over to somebody and go, look, I am sorry. I got mad. I ran my mouth. I'll do better next time. Just know that I didn't mean it in that way, and I'm sorry. Well, voters, you don't have to go say you're sorry to be a Democrat, but you say, look, we've lost our way a little bit. Like, we spent the last two elections talking about all these other issues that weren't rooted in family, your job, how to make more money, how to get shit to cost less. That's what people want to hear. And that's what Donald Trump has done so well. Not that he's some icon of anything, he's full of shit. But he would show up and bullshit them like uh like an old country saying that if you lie long enough about having a horse, eventually somebody will buy you a saddle. Like that's all he does is lie all the time, but he knows it's propaganda. I'm not saying us show up and lie, but at least show up and make the argument of that we're the party of the working class. That, like my mama said when I came home from a union meeting at 19, when I joined the factory and said, Mama, they had me sign a union card, and I did. And they had me sign a voter registration card, and I registered as a Democrat because everybody else registered as a Democrat. I assume we're Democrats. She said, honey, we are proud Democrats, but we hope to make enough money someday to be a Republican.
Yeah. Um, make enough money to vote like a Republican, right? But we haven't spent a lot of time talking about Trump, and I don't know if you want to shift gears here, talk a little bit more about the presidential.
What I want from you is we're getting close to the end, but I want to know where you think the ticket's going for 28. Who are the ones to watch and who are the ones that are impressing you?
Well, I am I'm a little bit partial to Bashir only because he has that Talarico. He's he comes across as very genuine, especially when he's talking about his faith. He did not apologize for standing up for women and their right to choose, and he did it in a way that was a master class. He ran a clinic when he got reelected. He got over, what, 60% of the vote, and unapologetic about those positions. He even stuck his neck out there for trans kids in a way that was respectable. So I think he's kind of the dark horse right now. You know, if you want, if this is going to be a knife fight, someone like Rom is going to bring a machete, and some argue that you need a real fighter. I just, I hate to say this, Chuck, but there is a growing anti-Semitic wing within the Democratic Party right now, and that is undeniable. I see it. I saw it at this conference the other day. There's a lot of little Arafat wannabes wearing that scarf, and really in your face, talking just rudely about Israel. And we can debate Israel another day, but that is poison. And if there has ever been an ally that we cannot do without, it is our Jewish brothers and sisters. They are. I put them up there with black women. They've been the backbone of our party. They've been there for the fights that needed to be fighting, and I worry about that. I worry about that a great deal, because if I'm in their shoes, I don't know that I feel welcome right now attending a Democratic Party function. But I don't want to get off too much on a tangent. But what I was going to say, Chuck, about Trump, and we could sit here and argue over all the things that we disagree with it, but he is the first president in my lifetime that has done anything meaningful in Latin America. What he is doing, taking on the cartels, and I say this as someone who has lost family to the cartel violence. I'll never forget one year, Secretary Clinton was serving the Obama administration. I had an aunt that called me frantic on the phone. She put the phone out. You hear that? Those are gunshots. I tried to get asylum for her, and they wouldn't help. And they almost lost me that year. I had a very hard time voting for Democrats. But here you got Trump, and you can argue this is something that someone like Rubio is going to really be able to take across the finish line when he's in that primary race, assuming he runs. And it's going to be a hard sell for Democrats to push back on, because what he's doing not only in Mexico but all of Latin America, battling crime, unlike we've ever done so as Democrats. That's going to mean a lot. Now, who knows where the economy is going to be then, right? But these are things that we need to at least keep an eye on, and you know, you have to give credit where credit is due, and what they're doing with Mexico specifically is you can't argue against it.
Well, Albert, I appreciate you taking the time. Tell folks again where they can find your book and what the name of your book is.
Yes, the name of the book is 40 Year Prayer. It's a girl dad book. It's not a long read. There's a much thicker version coming out down the road, but you could buy it at the Barnes and Noble, Westville Press, which is my publishing house, and obviously Amazon. But it's 40 Year Prayer, Albert Morales, the author. And I would appreciate it if you gave it a read and use the hashtag 40 Year Prayer.
Thanks, everybody, for joining the Rocha Revolution this week. We'll have Albert back in the next year when we do this Around the Sun again. And Albert, I'll be out in about a week and a half. We'll finish that fence up.
I
For
don't
the
know about
rest of
finish,
y'all,
but yeah.
well, it's almost finished. What?
I said, I don't know about finishing, but
Oh, no, we'll just take another bite at it. That's all we're going to do
yeah.
is take another bite at it.
All right. Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all next time.